Before we move on to the Navy game, we've got to put the finishing touches on Notre Dame's win over Georgia Tech. And in that game, one star on offense played like a star, and a bunch of freshmen have stepped up in a big way on Al Golden's defense. That's all coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm the host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And I appreciate you joining me here on this Tuesday, October 22nd, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts, and you can watch every episode on YouTube as well. Just remember to please like and subscribe if you are watching along on YouTube, or rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if that is how you're tuning in today. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's Tuesday, which means it is time for Luke Smith to come on the show so we can break down the three things we liked and didn't like from Notre Dame's win over Georgia Tech. And then we're going to start to look ahead to the Navy game coming up this Saturday. We covered a lot in this episode, so let's get right into it. Here's Luke. All right, normally we start off Tuesdays with Luke's boots on the ground report, but you did not make the trip to Atlanta for this one. So take me through your vantage point for this one and your biggest headline coming out of the weekend.
I think the biggest headline for me is that it seems like Notre Dame has the same health that they did going into the weekend, with maybe even getting some guys back. I don't want to jinx it, but there were some reports that maybe Billy Schroth will slightly be available this week. I don't know what that means. Mitch Jeter's kind of questionable still, but nobody, knock on whatever's next to you, seemed to have suffered any catastrophic injuries in this past one. So that's definitely an upgrade for me. Otherwise, kind of a boring ho-hum ACC game, which was pretty fine with me. We hadn't had one of those in a while, and maybe just what the doctor ordered. And as Notre Dame gets ready to play what is now a pivotal showdown with the Naval Academy at MetLife Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, how sad is it, though, that one of the biggest headlines, and I'm not even saying you're wrong, it's just the reality of the situation is that, well, no one got hurt, so big win.
It is, but I was kind of thinking about this earlier. Like, it's really been a weird season because you have this huge game at the start of the season playing Texas A&M. It's obviously that one's huge. Then the next week you're going into NIU, which nobody cares about. And of course, Notre Dame loses that game, so the sky's falling. But since then, I mean, even the Louisville game, like none of these games have really been that close. It's kind of just been a strange year where it's like Notre Dame kind of controls these games. They're not always playing the best teams, and there's some things we can dislike within their performances, but it's kind of a ho-hum year in some respects.
Yeah, I know this comparison has been made several times by now by multiple different outlets, but that felt like a Brian Kelly game in so many different ways. Just beating up on an ACC team that you're clearly better than. The defense controls them throughout. The offense has some flashes where like, wow, that looked really good, and then some moments where like, still need a lot of work to do on that side of the ball. But you know what? I'll take it because there was a brief moment in the first quarter, and I know that Notre Dame has given up points on the first drive a lot so far this season. So it's not even necessarily a critique of Al Golden's defense, but once Notre Dame came out, they go 3 and out, and they give up the touchdown, and they're just not really clicking. At any point in that time, did you think this is actually going to be a game, or were you just like, this is just kind of how this team starts?
Well, to be honest, I have to give Georgia Tech a little bit more credit. The backup Pyron came out and actually looks more competent than what had been described of his throwing abilities going into the game. He made a few throws, and he looked competent back there. But after those first 2 drives where Georgia Tech showed a little bit of life, they were just absolutely stymied by the Notre Dame defense for 3 quarters. And as you mentioned, we haven't always seen that from Marcus Freeman team, especially not against a team that has been so dominant on the ground coming in like Georgia Tech has been. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to run the ball, particularly with their quarterback out. But running the ball and their offensive line are the strength of that team, and somehow Notre Dame still held them to sub 70 yards rushing. So really impressive and just kind of stifling performance by the defense once again, even if it wasn't, all the way like that from the beginning of the game. It all in all was a very, very impressive performance.
The vibes going into the game were weird too, right? Because Haynes King, there was all that uncertainty in the week leading up. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Well, then we find out the day before he's officially going to be out. And then we find out the day of the game that their best defensive player, arguably their linebacker, Kyle Eford, he was going to miss the game. And then about an hour before, there were reports that maybe Jeremiah Love wouldn't play. And I was like, are you serious? Like, who is going to play in this game? Now, Jeremiah Love ended up playing. I thought he played really well. And actually, that's a good segue into what we liked and didn't like, because that's the first thing that I liked. One of my keys to the game going into this one was feed Jeremiah Love, because he just was not really a factor in that game against Stanford, even though he did have a 39-yard touchdown run. He just only had 7 touches in that game. So Notre Dame came out and they started utilizing him in a bunch of different ways. I thought this was the most effective he's been in the passing game, because that was something that we heard about in preseason, about how Mike Denbrock is going to use Jeremiah Love all over the field and he's taking reps with the wide receivers during spring practice. Well, he actually looked like a wide receiver and was more effective catching the ball than running the ball in this one. He had 14 carries for just 36 yards. But as a receiver, he had 3 catches, 57 yards, 3 first downs, 4 missed tackles forced, and 33 yards after catch. And he just looks different with the ball in his hands than any other player on the Notre Dame roster. And I'm glad that he was so involved in this game, especially considering the fact that there was some doubt whether or not he would even play.
I wonder where that doubt came from, or what was either bothering him or wasn't, because I still feel like even post-game I've heard some mixed things about whether or not he was at 100%. I don't really know what to believe, but I would argue it was probably his most complete game of the season. You're right. And it wasn't just him in that passing game of the backs. Aeneas Williams also had a nice pickup on a screenplay too on a 3rd down. But I like to see that, and I thought that was really part of the game where Mike Denbrock had that offense rolling and really found ways to get him the ball. And it really wasn't limited just to offense, right? On special teams, they made sure that he was getting touches, which I guess technically were through the air as well. So there was concerted effort to get him the ball, but it also didn't come at the expense of Jadarian Price. So I like that. I think they did a really good job of balancing that.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to take notice of how good he is as a lead blocker for Riley Leonard in the run game. I loved that one play when Riley Leonard just barely got across the end zone. But first of all, Jeremiah Love comes down, just absolutely pancakes. I believe it was a safety on Georgia Tech, knocks him on the ground, and then that player is leaning back, and then Riley Leonard just falls over him, uses his body to stay up. And I was like, man, that's a tough play on tape for number 7 in white.
Yeah, he's not going to want to see that one, or didn't want to see that one today, I would imagine.
No, it was not a good game for him, but that was one thing I did not really expect, not just this season with Jeremiah Love, but coming out of high school. I did not really expect him to be so physical. Credit to him for, first of all, adding weight, building strength in the weight room, but he's really utilizing it on the field. And when he hits guys, he likes to let them know about it afterwards too, and I like that too.
He does, and he was pretty demonstrative with the crowd throughout. And I mean, yeah, it was just another incredible performance from him. But in terms of guys that also were letting people feel it, Drake Bowen is another thing that I want to talk about in terms of I liked. He truly looked like he looked like a heat-seeking missile out there. And I don't use that term lightly, but I think that going into this season, he was probably the linebacker I was least sure of going into the year. And over the last 3 weeks, I'd argue he's probably been playing the best of any of them. He plays with a violence and quickness that I just didn't really think he had in him. And it's going to be fascinating to see him evolve as this year and beyond goes on in what's already a loaded linebacker room. I
think you and I both predicted that by this point in the season, KVA would be starting over him.
I think we did. And now it's like, if you can get both those guys on the field at the same time somehow, you should do it, just because it seems like the versatility that's offered there is kind of remarkable.
Well, that was another thing that we didn't really expect, because it kind of felt like one of the other has to be on the field at the same time. They're never going to be on the field together. And that has not been the case. They've been out there together a lot this season. And I think a big reason why is because the coaching staff feels comfortable taking Jack Kaiser off the field, which is not something that we would have said going into it. So seeing those two guys out there, and then you got Jaden Osbury making plays. Actually, I'll just get right into it, because the next thing I liked is the freshman on defense. And I'm including redshirt freshman in this as well. So Drake Bowen, was he an official redshirt? It's hard to keep track of who played in 4 games, because he played sparingly last year. Either way, a lot of young guys on this defense that have really shined, partially as a result of all the injuries. So you got Bryce Young, Drake Bowen, KVA, Jay Nosbury, Leonard Moore, and Adon Schuler. Those are 6 key guys on this Notre Dame defense. All of them are technically freshmen in terms of eligibility. You already mentioned him, Drake Bowen. I thought he was the defensive MVP in this game. Jay Nosbury's tackle on Jamal Haynes in the open field, he made it look easy. That is such a difficult play to make. Just ask Christian Gray how hard it is to make a tackle like that in the open field. Leonard Moore was outstanding in his second career start. Adon Schuler had the pick 6. KVA just out there making plays. So Notre Dame is going to lose a lot on defense after this year, like Howard Cross, Riley Mills, Jack Kaiser, and Xavier Watts. But the future is bright. And the fact that we're already seeing all of these guys get reps and play well is really encouraging for the future, because going into the season, I had a lot of concerns about the defense next year, not nearly as much anymore.
Totally. And I think that just speaks to the defensive coaching staff that Notre Dame has, both in evaluating these guys, but developing them quickly, because you never know who's going to fill these holes, but it looks like that defense is in prime position to really excel moving forward. But while I'm praising the coaching staff, I actually want to talk about the special teams play too, because it's not just the trickery where 2 plays that I didn't really see coming with the fake field goal and the fake punt, but they also had some impact with a muffed field goal and another block by Bryce Young, who is just a monster out there, and it's going to be fascinating to watch him grow. But it was nice to see Marty Biagi's group bounce back after what has been an uneven year at times. And I know there's still probably a little bit left to be desired with the punter, but all in all, I thought it was a pretty strong day for them, and not just confined to the trick plays.
What did you think of the trick plays?
I was surprised by them, but they were there, so may as well take them. I think if you look at how Georgia Tech has been on special teams this year, they've been horrible. So Notre Dame clearly saw something, and I think that was, while I kind of heard your argument that you might want to save those plays for a bigger game, and I can understand that, I think they might have seen something specifically on tape that they're like, we can do this against these guys because they're really bad on special teams.
Yeah, I think that was more specific to the fake punt because I like the design so much, and I just think that now teams are always going to be expecting a fake punt. But really, the fake field goal with Tyler Buchner was such a sneaky move. Like, you can only do that one time. You can only trot out Tyler Buchner wearing the same number as Chris Salerno to run a fake field goal. So that was the one where I was more on the side of like, man, I wish they would have just held on to that one, because I do think they're going to need that down the road. And now teams are going to be out there like maybe with binoculars trying to make sure that it's Chris Salerno going out there for the hold every time. But good for Tyler Buchner, man. I knew that he would make one play this year. I thought it'd be in garbage time, and this was close. But when he got out there and he was moving, I was like, man, who is that? That guy can really move. I'm like, oh, it's Tyler Buchner. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until much later that night. So that was an interesting discovery.
Yeah, good for him, though. He made some plays. All right, what do you got next?
So that was, really the other thing that I wanted to touch on was just the fact that it was a boring ACC game, and I kind of hit on that earlier. But I think just the fact that we were kind of able to relax. And, yeah, of course, there was a period of time where the offense was a little bit stagnant, and they might have been able to take advantage of a few more things from the Georgia Tech defense. All in all, the game was never in doubt, and that's something that I can appreciate because we don't get that all the time. So there we go.
Who would have thought that we have reached the point where we actually missed these types of games? Because in the past, there was just way too many of them. It was just like, here, we're doing this again. Notre Dame's going to handle Georgia Tech or Wake Forest. I mean, they did a little bit last year. They took care of business against Wake and against Pitt, but at that point in the season, it was all pretty much over. They already had 3 losses, and up to this point this season, Notre Dame, still has so much to play for, and I felt like this could potentially be a trap game. I wouldn't have been shocked if this was a game in the fourth quarter, just given the fact that Georgia Tech has played spoilers so many times. But then once Haynes King was out, it became pretty clear that Notre Dame should dominate them. But credit to them for getting it done, because that has not always been the case. And you mentioned the bit of a lull there on offense. I do want to give some credit to Riley Leonard for what he did after that interception. And that interception was terrible. It triggered me because it reminded me of that interception against Northern Illinois, like a post downfield. Now this one was going to Bo Cons instead of Chris Mitchell, like it was against NIU. But I really liked what he did on the 2 drives that followed that. He went 12 passing, almost 150 yards, and marched Notre Dame right down the field for 2 touchdowns. He didn't really make any throws that made you go, wow. I thought his best throw of the day was the slot fade to Jaden Greathouse, but that actually came in the third quarter. But he was making the right reads in the RPO. He was hitting guys. He made some nice screen passes where he had to show off his athleticism a little bit. But I think the main thing is, if you had asked me a few weeks ago, could you even imagine Riley Leonard going 12 of 12 passing in a game? I would have said no. So the fact that he's got that in him is certainly encouraging, despite the fact that things certainly slowed down in the second half there. I was just happy to see him get into a rhythm like that, especially after making a big mistake early on.
I mean, I don't know that I would have believed that last week, even after he played maybe his best game of the season against Stanford, just because it does feel like every fifth or sixth throw, he's good for just grounding one, essentially, just not getting it to the guys. So I agree. It was surprising, and it was good to see.
Like that throw to, I think he tried to force it into Jaden Thomas on that post there in the end zone. I was like, what are you doing? Like this?
Yeah.
There's too many times with him, especially for a senior quarterback, where it's like, it's not even about learning the offense. It's just understanding situational football. But I think that's part of the Riley Leonard experience. We used to call it the Ian Book experience back in the day. I think the Riley Leonard experience they got some similarities for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
We're going to be right back with Luke Smith here in a moment, but first it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we have pulled over $20,000 to support players on Roy, and micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, you get your money back. This week, I'm supporting Drake Bowen. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Bowen the love and keep him connected to our school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow, and your support sets your team up for success. Please don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you're entered. And if you're already on Roy, no problem. Any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. All right, let's move on to the things we didn't like. What was the worst thing to you?
Man, the worst thing? I don't know about the worst thing because I kind of want to save that for the end, and it's going to be personal. But I did not like the ACC officials once again. And, of course, it was the same crew from the Stanford game from last week. And I'm going to continue to harp on these guys until they're held accountable. Frankly, I don't know why we're getting the same crew 2 weeks in a row. Like, how many of these crews are there? That doesn't make any sense. But the delayed game on the defense, that's not a call, okay? Like, I know it is, like, in the rule book, technically a penalty, but have you ever seen that called before? But short of, like, somebody, like, picking up the ball and
I was
not
going to
letting
say, they literally, like, kick it,
Yeah. Like, it's just egregious. And I honestly thought that Georgia Tech's first touchdown, that the guy at his forward progress stopped, like, 2 seconds before he fumbled. So I don't know what we're doing 2 weeks in a row for that crew, just a touchdown angle where it's embarrassingly bad, and I don't get where they find these guys in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
I think that officiating in college football is reaching a breaking point here. Like, what happened in that Georgia-Texas game, first of all, with the terrible pass interference call, and then reversing the call because the crowd was borderline going to riot there. Like, it sets a bad precedent, man. It really does. And I know that might be like doomsday thinking, but I've never seen that happen. And I think there's going to be some fallout from that. But it just feels like it's been building up to this where there's just so many officiating mistakes. Like, what was another game? South Carolina, LSU early on in this year. Just some mind-boggling decisions by the officials, and then they go to review far too many times per game. So I agree with you on the ACC officials. It is pretty random that they had the same exact crew, but if they don't do something about it soon, it could get really bad. And I think it's going to happen in a really big playoff game, and that might be like the crescendo.
Yeah, I mean, if Saturday night wasn't enough where they just basically got, like you said, crowd, like mob mentality into lifting a flag, and I don't know what is. Those guys should out-ref another game.
Yeah, that was bad. All right, for me, this involves the broadcast. Luke, I don't know if you knew this. Notre Dame now has a 63% chance of making the college football playoff. And I'm probably going to bring that up again in 30 seconds, just like the broadcast did. It was relentless. And look,
Right.
I get that ESPN owns the rights to the college football playoff. They are going to talk about the playoff on broadcast. But this was during the first half of the game. It wasn't like a blowout late in the game where they're just trying to kill some time. They fired it off immediately. And it's like, okay, we get it. If Notre Dame wins this game, they have a better shot at making the playoff. That's another thing, too. It's not like groundbreaking stuff here. Yes,
Right.
if Notre Dame loses, that's their second loss. Their chances of making the college football playoff are going to be in jeopardy. But the fact that they just kept doing it over and over and over. And I don't work on live game events or anything like that, but like, clearly, they had some discussion in their production meetings in the lead up, like, hey, we've got this graphic. How many times do we want to fire it off? Maybe 3 more.
15?
5 more. 20 more. Like, it was nuts. I felt like, I honestly thought that they were like playing a prank on us, but they were being serious. And I actually liked the commentating crew, but that was just brutal. And it made it almost felt like they were belittling the game in a way, because they're like, this is irrelevant. Notre Dame just has to win this and then move on. And I think some people, big picture, that's a frustration they have with college football coverage as a whole. But I thought during that broadcast, that was one of the worst I've ever seen.
It was bad. I'm glad that I really didn't have the sound on for most of that, because those poor guys, I mean, I don't even know what they talk about. But I think the flip side of this, right, is I've seen a lot of people complaining about Notre Dame being number 12 in the rankings, like in the AP poll, and get jumped by BYU. And like, I agree with you. I don't think BYU or Iowa State or Tennessee are better than Notre Dame. I don't. But it's week 7. Like, Notre Dame's played 7 games. They barely played half the season. These things are going to take care of themselves. And I think that everybody, it's not just the broadcast. Fans are so conditioned to only think of things within the context or the vein of the college football playoff that it seeps into the mainstream like that. And I mean, I kind of get why ESPN is doing that, because that's all anybody thinks about anyways.
Yeah, and once they expanded it to 12 and so many more teams were involved, you knew it was only going to get worse. Like, I really hated it when there were only 4 teams, because you're like, there's really not that many teams who have a realistic shot, even at this point in the season. But the playoff rankings, the first one, they come out 2 weeks from tomorrow, or I guess today, if you're listening to this on a Tuesday. So it's only going to get ramped up. But I just thought it was so extreme during this game. It'd be one thing if Georgia Tech had any chance of making the playoff, but they don't. So I saw a lot of complaints about it on Twitter, and I agree with everyone else on this. It was way, way over the top. So I don't think they're going to change anything, though.
No, that's the way they are.
Yeah.
More big picture stuff for me. And this feels kind of picky, I'll admit, but there's really been a lack of involvement from Jordan Faison in the passing game. And what I will say is that today in his press conference, Marcus Freeman was effusive in his praise of Faison in the blocking game. And this is just hand up. Like, I barely even noticed him out there. Maybe like I actually will say the camera was really weird in that game, I thought. But
It was weird, yeah.
He apparently had a great blocking day, according to the coaches, graded out well, but he has less catches this season than he did in the Sun Bowl last year. And I know a lot of this is due to injury, but he really feels like a weapon Notre Dame can unlock in the second half of this season and make this offense more explosive. So that's something that, along with getting Mitchell Evans going more, and I think they started to do that a little bit this week, I would really like to see Faison get involved in the passing game, because I think he has an element to his game that not even like Chris Mitchell offers. I think like he's a unique talent in that Notre Dame receiving room, and I'd like to see that get unlocked.
You're right. He has 4 catches for 29 yards with a long of 13. Now, granted, he did get injured in the season opener against Texas A&M, but I would like to see them force feed the ball to Faison a little bit next week, kind of like what they did with Mitchell Evans in this past game. He played 51 snaps, the most on the year. He had 4 catches. They didn't really go for that many yards. I really thought that he was going to house that little throwback screen they ran to him, which was a great play design. He just doesn't he doesn't have that burst yet. I think that's going to come in time, but the fact that they're like, we need to get him more involved in the passing game is certainly a step in the right direction, because he was a non-factor against Stanford. So if they're able to do the same thing next week with Faison, that could be a big step in the right direction. I just don't think he's been healthy.
Exactly. You're right. But I just and so this isn't necessarily a criticism of him or even the coaching staff or Riley Leonard even, but I know that ability is there, and I would really like to see that uncorked here as we go through the stretch run.
Yeah, because even though Bo Collins is the leading receiver on this team, he hasn't really been that dynamic with the ball in his hands. He has 26 catches, 317 receiving yards, which is over 100 yards more than number 2. That's Jane Greathouse. He only has 202 receiving yards this year. So I agree with you. Faison beat out Chris Mitchell in preseason, and Chris Mitchell has been getting a ton of snaps. So that shows you the type of belief that this coaching staff has in Jordan Faison. Hopefully we get to see that sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
All right, I got another one here. I know you got one left here, so I can go through these two relatively quickly. So the first one, Georgia Tech's garbage time touchdown pissed me off. I predicted 35-7. It would have been really close if it actually ended 31-7. But I think I'm more annoyed that that's going to affect these defensive numbers here for Al Golden and his group. So I think at the end of the year, you're going to be looking at a lot of these games, and Georgia Tech is going to end up scoring the most points, or one of the most points of any team on this Notre Dame defense. Other than Louisville, but again, 2 of those touchdowns were literally gift wrapped to him. So I was just more annoyed about the numbers there because I didn't think they deserved it. I mean, they had Max Hurlman out there at nickel, and they scored that late. And thank God it wasn't like a backdoor cover or anything like that, but still, that just annoyed me.
You've been pretty close on a lot of these score predictions lately until the last possible minute, the last few weeks, I feel like.
I have, and I have not hit one exact though.
Yeah. That drive didn't bother me as much as some drives from the past, like a Dino Babers or a Navy where you kick a field goal to prevent getting shut out. But what I will say is that it was kind of reckless from Brent Key because the quarterback's arm is hanging off his body. I think he actually tried to come out of the game, and they were like, no, stay out there. And it's I don't really know what you're doing with your backup in complete garbage time, and you're already getting your starters out. You're getting whooped. The poor kid out there, I give him credit for putting the ball in the end zone, but at what cost?
Yeah, exactly. Have you seen that video that NFL Films put out years ago? It's Matthew Stafford against the Browns in that last drive where the camera just basically stays on him, and he throws a touchdown late, and he gets crushed on the play. I think his shoulder separates from his body, and then they go out there, they go for 2 for the win, and then they beat the Browns. And there's this video on YouTube. It's basically just 7 minutes straight, and the camera's just on Matthew Stafford. And you watch him get injured, go to the sideline. He literally is in so much pain and can't really feel his arm. And then he's oh, we're going for it. Goes back out there, throws the go-ahead score there. And I'm wow, this guy literally sacrificed his body. They get the win. Now, he ended up having to miss several weeks. So it felt like Georgia Tech was doing the same thing, but instead of getting the win, they just lost by less points. And you're right, at what cost? Because Haynes King is not going to play again this weekend. And if Pyron is actually hurt, they're going to have to go to their third string, all for a garbage time touchdown to cut the deficit to 22.
Yeah. Now, it seemed like both coaching staff and several media members were upset with Notre Dame for going on fake field goals and fake punts when it was a 17-point game. So maybe this touchdown really meant a lot to them, even though I would argue a 2-score game in the fourth quarter is not, in fact, a blowout where you're looking for style points.
Yeah, it sounds like you got something to get off your chest.
There's a guy on the Georgia Tech beat that and let me preface this with saying these opinions are my own. They're not reflective of any network whatsoever. However, this guy, Kelly Quinlan from Rivals, writing about Georgia Tech, some of the most unprofessional stuff I have ever seen. First off, and you talked about this on your show, I think, today, in reference to Freeman calling those fakes, he called them or said that that move made him look like a piece of shit. And then he, of course, also had this deleted tweet that thankfully somebody dug up, and I had to call him out for. And just to make sure that I have this exactly right, here's what he said. It would be poetic justice if Leonard gets hurt here because ND is trying to win some style points. This is a grown man reporting on a college football game saying that it would be poetic justice if a starting quarterback gets injured in a 24-7 football game. I mean, dude, what are you doing? And like, I know there's plenty of beat writers out there that Notre Dame is already not fond of, but this guy should really be at the top of the list. I tweeted at him telling him he was garbage and he blocked me, so I can't go at him anymore. But if anybody else listening to this wants to pile in on @Kelly_Quinlan, be my guest, because he is an absolute joke and should not be covering collegiate athletics if he's going to be rooting for injuries of players. Okay, rant over.
I could not believe that he said that about Leonard. I completely missed that. I don't know how long that post was up, but I did see him calling out Marcus Freeman like that. And what are you trying to accomplish? And it'd be one thing if the score was like 40-0. Like the game was kind of in jeopardy in a way.
Yeah.
Like, no, we didn't have any concerns about whether Notre Dame was actually going to win it late, but it was at least somewhat in doubt based on the score, the time, all that stuff. So yeah, I couldn't believe he did that, but this is what happens. Sometimes you get fans as beat writers, and those fans let out their emotions, and all objectivity goes out the window.
Yeah, pretty crazy. But shout out to him. Thanks for giving me. I haven't really felt that.
I was going to say, you haven't really gone at a beat writer on Twitter in a long time.
I'm getting more measured in my late 20s here, but this guy, he really deserved probably a stronger wrath than I even gave him.
All right, last thing, my final gripe. And we have talked about this before. I just really don't like playing college football games in NFL stadiums, and Notre Dame is about to do it in back-to-back weeks. I understand that there's some stuff going on with Georgia Tech. They're playing some more games there as a way to generate a little bit more revenue. I don't know all the specifics there, but you and I were both not in attendance for this one, and just talking to a few people that were there, they said it was a really cool stadium. It could be cool if, the crowd was packed and it was a big game, but they just said it was a bit of a snooze fest. Definitely more Notre Dame fans than Tech fans there, probably around like 60-40 in favor of Notre Dame in that one. But I just feel like this game would have been a lot more fun if it was at Bobby Dodd. You have been to that stadium. I think you liked it, right?
Yeah, it's cool. It's, it's not that big, but it's got an awesome view of the Atlanta skyline. We went there during COVID, so it was like, I don't know, maybe 30-50% capacity or something, but I thought it was cool. And I think that if that game had been played at night at Bobby Dodd, probably would have been a lot more hostile of an environment to play in than Mercedes-Benz, where it was 50% full and 75% of that was Notre Dame fans. So yeah.
Yeah. And then Notre Dame plays Navy this weekend. We can honestly just start talking about the Navy game now, because that game is going to be at MetLife. And I know that Notre Dame has played Navy on neutral sites whenever Navy is technically the home team for a long time now, so that more people can go to the game. But Reese Davis said that if this game were in Annapolis, game day would be there. And I don't know how many people in the crowd would actually be able to attend this one, but I'd like to see it. I know you were in Annapolis recently. You said that it's a cool area. It'd be really cool for Notre Dame to actually play there one time. This feels like a good time to do it. And I just think that playing a noon game at MetLife, it just has no juice to it, where if it was at Navy, sure, not as many people would be able to attend, but I think it would be a really cool experience and something that Notre Dame should consider in the near future here, because I don't know the last time they played at Annapolis, if they ever have, but I think it'd be really cool.
No, they've never done it, and I don't think they ever will, to be honest. But you're right. I think it'd be really cool. And yeah, if you want to do some research on that, I'm pretty sure they've never done it. But have you been to MetLife before? Because I haven't, but everybody I know who has does not like it. So I think that's very much going to be a BYOJ, bring your own juice type of game.
I have driven past it, and I was like, wow, it's really far away from the city.
It's not easy to get to.
It's not easy to get to. It's out there.
Tough.
I don't think that's going to be packed. And I'm looking at it right now. Memorial Stadium in Annapolis, Maryland has a seating capacity of 34,000. That's not that bad. If it were,
it's pretty small. It
is small, but it'd be packed. It'd be fun.
No, definitely. I will say I do know a bunch of people going to this game this weekend. I will be in New York myself. I'm not going to the game, but I think it'll be just like it's an early morning kick, probably kind of dead there, but I think it'll be a decently filled stadium.
How are you feeling about this matchup as we sit here early on in the week?
I've been kind of cautioning about this one for a few weeks, but doing some research on Navy myself today, I'm starting to feel better about it. I think Notre Dame's going to win the game, but What they can't do is have a lull like they did on offense this past week, and they need to be very efficient with the ball. I think the opportunities are going to be there because Navy's defense has let up a lot of points at different times. So I think they win the game, but it could be a good test. And I think I'm glad that they're playing Navy before Army first, to be totally honest with you. I don't know why I feel that way, but I'm saying that.
Interesting. Are you more concerned about Army than Navy?
No, Navy actually scares me more than Army.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth. I mean, you and I talked about this off air. If you rewatch that game last year, and Notre Dame won like 42-3, but Navy's offense actually had opportunities early on in the game. They dropped some passes there. They actually had Notre Dame beat. I believe it was on a third or fourth down. They threw the ball downfield. The receiver just had it in his hands and dropped it. Yeah. Notre Dame completely dominated them on offense. Navy's defense looked hopeless trying to tackle Audric Esme, and then Audric Esme got benched, and it didn't even matter because then they just brought in Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. Like, everyone was scoring their first touchdown. But you're right. Notre Dame's offense cannot afford to have a lull. I think they'll be fine. They should be able to run the ball on Navy, but that's going to be a really tough task for the defense, particularly those young linebackers, man, because they've never seen this before. This is one game where Jack Kaiser should not come off the field because he's seen it. He's been there, done that.
And weirdly, and I think as Tim O'Malley of Irish Illustrated has pointed this out, Jalen Snead has started in both Navy games in his career too, which is
I think he's
interesting.
Having a huge
game. We'll see what they do with him if they use him as a wrecker. But I will be very interested to watch the edge guys in this one with Bryce Young and then RJ Oben, who hasn't done a fantastic job setting the edge this year. I think this is where you could really miss Jordan Botelho. So we'll see what that is, but. I think the one point, you made that they kind of moved the ball and like just had some drops. The funny thing is that OC got fired last year, the Navy one. It's a new guy this year. So we'll see. They're going to play hard. I just got another wedding. So I just don't want the drama of going into a wedding in a fourth quarter game again. But maybe since it's Navy, it won't be very long anyways.
I've got a wedding as well. I'm going to be in Louisville, Kentucky for this one. And fortunately, the wedding is in the afternoon. So the noon game actually worked out.
It helps a little
bit. This is
the
one weekend where I'm like, cool, a noon game. That's perfect. Otherwise, I would have had to wake up and be stressing at 9 a.m., which I had to deal with that last year when Notre Dame got beat by Clemson. I'm like, this is how the day is going to go. We're just going to wake up and get smacked around by Clemson. But this game, you and I have talked about how we feel about the Navy game. We don't have to rehash it all right now, but this is like the prime scenario where it's like you get a good Navy team who actually is dangerous, and if Notre Dame beats them, it really does not matter because the moment it happens, the whole national media love affair for them will go away. But then maybe they'll just all shift their focus to Army because they play Army here in a few more weeks. I also kind of forget that Notre Dame is a bye after this week too.
Yeah, they sure do, and which hopefully can really help with getting some of those guys back to 100%. But, yeah, we'll see what happens.
I was going to say I don't buy that you're not going to the game when you said you're going to be in New York, but then once you said you were in a wedding, I was like, okay.
I don't have an out here, so I'm okay with it. I don't think I need to see MetLife ever, to be honest.
All right, we'll end it there. Luke, we'll talk to you again next Tuesday, hopefully with a nice Navy nice Navy win to talk about, and then we can forget about it for another full year like we always look forward to.
Sounds terrific.
Today's episode is presented by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All right, here's my pick this week. We're going to look ahead to Thursday Night Football. We've got the Minnesota Vikings at the Los Angeles Rams. This should be a much more entertaining game than last Thursday Night Football, in which I gave out the Saints. That did not really work out that well, but we are back on it this week. Vikings -3. That is my pick for this week. I think they're going to go into LA, get the win, and they're going to cover that 3-point spread. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com today. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Tomorrow, we turn the page to Notre Dame's upcoming game against Navy. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not feeling super confident about this matchup, but we're going to cover it throughout the rest of the week. Also, we got a mailbag in store for you on Friday, so remember to get your questions in. And please remember to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow.